I never thought I'd catch my own mother making out with my fiancé behind our barn at midnight. You know that crushing feeling when your lungs collapse and your legs stop working? That was me barefoot on the wet grass, phone in hand, recording the scene that would destroy my entire universe. My mom had always been my safe place. She was the one who taught me to braid my hair, who packed my lunch every day until high school, who cried at every dance recital and graduation. And my fiancé, he was the boy next door who grew into the man I planned to build a life with. Lazy Sunday mornings, a garden full of tomatoes, kids running around in the yard. But in that single horrifying moment, I realized my mother and the man I loved had betrayed me in the most vicious way possible. Instead of crumbling, something inside me snapped. I decided I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg. No, I would make them feel the same choking agony they planted inside me. And it wouldn't be behind closed doors, it would happen in front of everyone they cared about. You think this is just another affair story? No, this is a story of blood-deep betrayal, the kind that splits your soul, and the revenge that would become my twisted salvation. I never thought I'd hear my mother giggling like a teenager in the middle of the night, let alone see her wrapped around my fiancé like they were high school sweethearts, sneaking off to make out behind the bleachers. But there I was, standing by the back window of our family farmhouse in Tennessee, watching through the moonlit haze as my mother Claire and my fiancé Tyler kissed like they'd been waiting their entire lives for this moment. My heart didn't just break, it detonated. I dropped the glass of water I'd been holding. It shattered on the kitchen floor, but I couldn't even flinch. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat, stuck like a scream I couldn't let out. Tyler was supposed to be the love of my life, the boy who grew up next door, who once carved my initials into the oak tree by the river. And my mom, she was my best friend, my biggest supporter, the woman who used to sing me lullabies when I had nightmares. I felt like I was watching strangers wearing their faces. Every memory, every hug, every tear suddenly turned into a cruel, elaborate lie. My knees buckled, but I gripped the countertop and forced myself to stay standing. I needed to see this clearly. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and hit record. I don't even know what part of me decided to document it. Maybe it was pure survival instinct. Maybe it was the part of me that refused to let them gaslight me later. I zoomed in as Tyler pulled her closer, whispering something into her ear that made her laugh in that soft, airy way I always thought was reserved for me. Through the thin summer air, I could hear her say, "We'll always have each other even after tomorrow." She doesn't have to know yet. Tomorrow, our wedding day, the day I had been dreaming about since I was 15, the day I thought I'd finally start my forever. I wanted to kick open the back door, run outside, scream at them until my voice bled. But my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I stood there like a ghost, cold and invisible, in my own home. And in that moment, a single dangerous thought took shape in my mind. No, I won't stop this wedding. I'll let them believe they've fooled me. I'll let them walk right up to that altar and look me in the eyes. And then I'll destroy them in front of every single person they love. I felt my pulse slow, my breathing steady. The grief turned into ice, and the ice turned into something sharper than rage. A quiet, deadly resolve. I put my phone down, wiped my tears on the sleeve of my old t-shirt, and whispered to myself, they picked the wrong woman to betray. The sun rose the next morning like nothing had happened. It felt almost insulting, the soft orange glow pouring through my bedroom window, birds chirping like they hadn't just witnessed my entire world splinter into pieces. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in that old t-shirt phone clutched in my fist like a weapon. My reflection in the mirror didn't look like me. My eyes were swollen, my hair wild from a night of restless pacing. But underneath all that, there was a hard, focused stare I barely recognized. I opened my phone and went straight to Tyler's messages. I knew his password of course trust, I used to call it. Now it felt like a joke. There they were, weeks of messages between him and my mother. Sweet secret confessions, private jokes, plans to meet at cheap motels under fake names. One text from Mom read, "She's so naive. We'll tell her eventually, or maybe we won't." I nearly threw up. As I scrolled further, I found receipts for hotel rooms dating back almost a year. My stomach clenched. They hadn't just betrayed me recently. They had been entwined in this twisted secret for so long that my entire engagement, the cake tastings, the dress fittings, the guest list arguments, was all built on lies. My mother had even helped me pick out my wedding dress, holding my hand as I cried about how perfect it felt. The memory twisted into something rotten and foul. I checked my closet and pulled out the ivory gown she had called the dress of my dreams. I wanted to rip it to shreds right then, but something stopped me. Instead, I traced the lace neckline with my fingers. A new idea started to form, dark and electric buzzing in my veins. I walked into the kitchen to find my father sitting with a cup of coffee. His eyes crinkled into a smile. Nor a big day today, huh? He was the only one in this house who still deserved my love. The thought of him discovering the truth, how deeply his wife and future son-in-law had humiliated him, nearly broke me all over again. I kissed his cheek and forced a smile. Yeah, big day. He squeezed my hand and said, I'm so proud of you. I turned away so he wouldn't see the tears welling up. In that moment, I promised myself I would protect him from the worst of it. But I wouldn't protect them. No, they were going to feel the full weight of their betrayal. After breakfast, I drove into town and printed out copies of all the screenshots and photos. I also designed small cards with a QR code that led to an online gallery of all their filthy evidence. On each card, I wrote a special message from the bride and groom, don't miss it. As I stood there in the print shop, my hands strangely steady, I felt the old version of me slip away completely. They thought they could break me, but I was about to show them exactly how wrong they were. I drove home from the print shop with the box of cards in my passenger seat, glancing at them like they were little bombs waiting to detonate. Each card felt heavy, humming with the weight of every lie they had whispered in the dark. When I pulled into the driveway, my mother was on the porch, tying white satin ribbons around mason jars for the reception. She looked up and beamed at me like nothing was wrong. Morning, sweetie, ready for the big day? Her voice dripped with that same sugary warmth she'd used my whole life, the voice that used to soothe me after nightmares. Now it made my skin crawl. I forced a laugh stepping out of the car and hugging her. Up close, I could smell his cologne on her. Tyler's cologne. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down with a bitter smile. I just needed to run a few last-minute errands, I lied. Tyler pulled up right after me in his old red pickup. He jumped out all confident swagger and kissed my forehead. Can't wait to see you in that dress, he said, flashing the crooked smile that once made my heart stutter. Now it looked like a wolf's grin. Me too, I whispered, barely trusting my voice. For the rest of the morning, we moved through the motions like marionettes in a grotesque play. My bridesmaids arrived chattering and sipping mimosas in my childhood bedroom, while my mother floated around offering advice and checking makeup. Every compliment from her, you look radiant. Tyler won't know what hit him stabbed deeper than any knife. Behind every smile, I pictured her lips on his neck, her hands on his shoulders, her whispered promises in the dark. At one point, I slipped away to my old closet, sliding down onto the floor with my knees pressed to my chest. My hands shook as I opened my phone again and scrolled through the screenshots. My mother's messages were laced with an intimacy that felt almost incestuous in its violation of trust. I heard footsteps in the hallway. One of my bridesmaids knocked softly, Nora. You okay in there? I quickly wiped my eyes, shoving my phone into my pocket. Yeah. Just taking a breath, I called out, forcing my voice to sound cheerful. She peeked in and smiled, oblivious. Just checking. We're almost ready to get you into your dress. I nodded, standing up. I'll be right there. As I slipped into the gown, I felt my rage crackle beneath my skin like a hidden storm. My mother zipped me up with shaking hands, guilt or maybe anticipation, I couldn't tell. Our eyes met in the mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of fear in hers. I turned to her and smiled, a soft, dangerous smile. Thank you for everything, Mom. She let out a breathy laugh, completely unaware that I meant every single word as a threat. The guests began arriving right on time, their laughter echoing across the old farmhouse lawn, weaving between the mason jar lanterns and flower petals scattered down the aisle. I watched from the upstairs window veil, draped lightly over my face. To them, it was a perfect Tennessee summer wedding, soft, romantic, dripping in that country charm Pinterest aesthetic. I clutched the small stack of cards in my hand, each one holding a quiet promise of chaos. My fingers traced the edges as if they were rosary beads, each card a whispered prayer for revenge. My father stood near the big oak tree, greeting neighbors and distant cousins with his warm, easy smile. Seeing him in his navy suit nearly crushed me all over again. He deserved so much better than the heartbreak about to detonate in his life. I knew he wouldn't escape the collateral damage, but I also knew he'd understand one day why I had to do it this way. Down below, my mother floated between guests in her pale lavender dress and stopping to hug friends and fuss over the flower arrangements. Tyler stood beside the arch, shaking hands, telling jokes, performing the role of the devoted groom so perfectly that it made my stomach churn. When the wedding coordinator, Lila, came to fetch me, she found me sitting quietly, staring at my reflection. "Nora, are you ready?" she asked softly. I turned to her and nodded. "I have a favor," I said, my voice trembling just enough to seem like pre-wedding jitters. "Could you hand out these cards before the ceremony starts? Tell everyone it's a surprise thank you from me and Tyler." Lila's eyes lit up. "Of course. That's such a sweet idea." As she left with the cards, I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension coil tighter in my chest. I imagined each guest scanning that code, seeing the screenshots, the confessions, the timestamps. I pictured their expression shifting from delight to confusion to horror. I walked downstairs slowly, every step echoing like a war drum. My bridesmaids gasped when they saw me in the gown they called me stunning, angelic, radiant. They had no idea they were standing beside a ticking bomb. Lila gave me a quick thumbs up from the crowd. She had finished distributing the cards. Tyler's eyes met mine across the yard, and he gave me a playful wink, oblivious to the catastrophe inching toward him. My mother stood behind him, tucking a stray hair behind her ear, her smile bright enough to blind me. As I took my place beside my father to walk down the aisle, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen." I bit down on my lips so hard I tasted blood. The music swelled. Guests rose to their feet, turning toward us with warm, expectant smiles, each one holding a card, each one seconds away from their own private explosion. I took one deep final breath. The show had officially begun. Halfway down the aisle, I began to see the first faces change. At first, just small frowns, tilted heads, the way people look when they don't quite understand a joke. Then, as they glanced down at their phones again, their expressions hardened. Mouths dropped open, the hands flew up to cover shocked gasps. Aunt Becky let out a strangled sob. My cousin Logan turned to his wife, eyes wide, shaking his head in disbelief. By the time I reached the halfway point, the entire sea of guests had transformed into a living mosaic of horror. Tyler's face was the last to catch up. I watched the exact moment he saw the panic ripple through the crowd, his smirk faltering as he glanced at his own mother, showing her phone to his father. His hand dropped from the boutonniere he'd been fidgeting with, and his entire body went stiff. My mother noticed next. She looked from guest to guest, confusion twisting into fear, her painted-on smile cracking like old porcelain. She fumbled with her clutch, desperately scanning the crowd for an explanation. When I finally stood at the front, I turned to face everyone, my father still at my side. I could feel his hand tremble against mine. His eyes darted around, trying to piece together the sudden chaos. Father Matthews, the officiant, cleared his throat and tried to continue. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today," I interrupted. My voice came out stronger than I expected, echoing across the hushed lawn. "Stop." Silence dropped like a bomb. Birds fell quiet. Even the cicadas seemed to hush as if the whole world was holding its breath. I stepped forward and let go of my father's hand. I turned toward Tyler and my mother, who now looked like deer in headlights. "Tyler," I began, my voice trembling just enough to show the raw edge beneath. "When you asked me to marry you under that big oak, I thought it was the happiest day of my life. And Mom, you told me love was the purest thing a person could give. Turns out both of you lied to me in ways I never could have imagined." A few guests started crying. Others shook their heads in disgust. I continued stepping even closer. "While I was picking out dresses and dreaming about our future, you two were, well, you've all seen it now, you know the truth." I turned to face the guests, my chest heaving. "Thank you all for coming today. I hope you enjoy the gift. I left you a real glimpse into what love looks like when it's poisoned from the inside." Tyler stuttered, "Nora, I can explain." I raised a hand, silencing him instantly. My mother's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling as she mouthed my name like a prayer she didn't deserve to utter. I felt the sun on my face, the air heavy with shock and shame. I took one final look at them, the two people who had shredded my heart, and turned away without another word. I didn't look back as I walked down the aisle, my dress sweeping across the grass like a white flag I refused to raise. Behind me, the lawn had erupted into chaos, guests yelling, some rushing to comfort my father, others trying to shield their children's eyes. A few pulled out their phones to record. I could hear snippets of frantic whispers. How could her own mother, and that poor girl? I kept moving, focused on the gravel path that led to the old barn. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it might crack my ribs open, but my steps were steady. With every footfall, I felt the weight of my old life fall away, each lie and each betrayal sliding off me like mud in the rain. At the edge of the yard, I paused and finally looked back. My father was crumpled on a bench, head in his hands, his whole body shaken with sobs. Seeing him like that nearly broke me all over again. A neighbor had an arm wrapped around his shoulders, whispering something I couldn't hear. Tyler was shouting after me now, stumbling across the lawn like a drunk, his face red and contorted. My mother stood frozen beside the altar, her makeup streaked down her cheeks, gripping the edge of a chair, as if the earth might swallow her whole. I felt a pang of pity for them, so small, so pathetic in their shame. But that pity lasted only a moment before it turned into a clean, cold emptiness. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from my best friend Paige. "Oh my God. I'm here for you. Where are you?" I texted back with trembling fingers. "I'm okay. Don't come after me. Stay with my dad." I reached my old pickup truck, the same one I used to drive to high school rodeos, and tossed my veil into the front seat. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before finally starting the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw guests beginning to leave in stunned silence, some still glued to their screens, others hugging each other like they had just watched a funeral instead of a wedding. I drove aimlessly at first down winding country roads I knew by heart. The fields blurred past me, golden and green, the summer air thick with humidity and grief. Finally, I parked at the edge of a field where wildflowers grew tall and untamed. I stepped out and fell to my knees in the dirt, sobbing until I felt like my lungs might give out. Between each broken breath, I whispered to the wind, "I did it. I really did it." And for the first time in days, I felt something like relief wash over me. It wasn't joy, it wasn't freedom, but it was a beginning. I stayed in that field until the sky turned deep purple and the first stars blinked awake above me. My dress was covered in dirt and grass stains, my hair tangled and sticky from tears. But I didn't care. Out there with the crickets humming and the wildflowers brushing against my arms, I felt more myself than I had in years. I checked my phone again. Dozens of missed calls and texts from Paige from my dad, even from relatives I barely spoke to. Tyler had called me 12 times. My mother had tried to FaceTime me twice. I ignored them all. The girl who would have answered, who would have begged for explanations, who would have tried to fix everything, she was gone. I left her behind in that white dress on the lawn. Around midnight, I drove back to the farmhouse one last time. The place was quiet dark, except for the porch light. My dad's truck was gone. Paige had taken him to her parents' place to stay the night. I stepped inside, my shoes silent on the old wooden floors. The smell of my mother's lavender candles still hung in the air, almost mocking me. I went straight to my room, packed a duffel bag with a few clothes, my old journals, and a photo of me and my dad fishing when I was 7. That was all I needed. I paused at my mother's door. My hand hovered over the knob. For a moment, I almost knocked. Almost. But then I remembered the sound of her laughing with Tyler, the softness in her voice when she said, "She doesn't have to know yet." I turned and walked away. By dawn, I was on the highway headed west. I didn't have a clear plan, just an old friend's couch waiting for me in Colorado, and the promise of a fresh start. In the weeks that followed, the fallout at home was catastrophic. My dad filed for divorce within days. My mother's face disappeared from the church volunteer boards and local charity galas. Tyler lost his job at the local construction company. No one wanted to hire the man who destroyed his fiancée's life with her own mother. People in town called me brave, some called me cruel, but they didn't know the full story, the rot that had been growing beneath our family's white picket fence facade for years. In Colorado, I started working at a small farm-to-table cafe. Most people there didn't know my past. I liked it that way. I could be whoever I wanted. Strong, distant, slow, to trust, but alive. Some nights I still heard my mother's voice echoing in my head, and the ache would slice through me so sharply I had to pull over and breathe. But other nights I felt a quiet pride flicker inside me, a reminder that I had chosen my own survival over their comfort. And in that flicker, I found something that felt almost like hope. 6 months later, I'm still here in Colorado, breathing air that smells like pine and fresh rain. Some days the scars feel raw, and I wonder if I'll ever fully trust again. But other days I catch myself laughing over coffee with new friends, or feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin, and I realize I'm healing slowly, messily, but truly. My father and I talk on the phone every Sunday. We're building something new together, piece by piece. He always tells me he's proud of me, and for the first time, I finally believe him. As for my mother and Tyler, they live with the ghosts of their choices. Their lives shrank to whispers and stares in a small town that never forgets. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did. I don't. Betrayal that deep deserves the light of day, no matter how harsh. My story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming myself, my voice, my future. If you're still here, thank you for listening to my story. And if you've ever felt lost or broken, I hope you find the courage to stand up and take your power back, even if it shatters everything first. Please consider following along for more stories. You never know whose truth might save you next.